Alright, so the point Steve is making is early on I said refitting or replacing an existing system is actually easier. Steve makes an excellent point. You should probably figure out if that system works and meets their needs. Lots of times they use it because that's what they had, and this is an opportunity to give them something better. All right.
Jeremy, could you go a little more into what code module coherence is?
So code module coherence, a very easy explanation or example is my measure method should not measure and decimate and analyze and spit out a processed number, right? My measure method should just measure. Those other things should be their own methods. It will make things much easier to maintain. It'll make it easier to copy. Your children classes will have much cleaner inheritances. You will have fewer overrides. And when one guy in your team needs to change something, he's not changing 3 people's code. Dimitri, I'm a little scared about your question.
Very simple one. Did you consider using Actor Framework instead of this? And if not, and if yes, why did you do it?
Okay, that is a good question. Did I consider using Actor Framework for this? Briefly, this has been going on for 1.5 years. When I started, for all I knew, it was only going to be 1 month. So this started as, or this grew. It was not a large system to begin with. It was a experimental prototype system with 1 test fixture. And Actor Framework takes a commitment to start, and I didn't think, I didn't think my customer was ready for that commitment. Also, they were already anxious enough about me just looking at OO code that I didn't want to go all the way.
Going back to the increased performances, would you consider building your agents into PPLs, maybe boosting architecture?
Okay, for increased performance, would I maybe move my actors into PPLs? Yes. I don't, yes. So, Thijs, how is that? I'm thinking yes, because while that would make this really portable, reusable on my next projects, but I am running to keep up, and I have not had time to do that exercise. I was not aware that project libraries would increase performance. Is that something you've experienced?
Yes.
Okay, everyone take note. Is your baby mean that?
I mean, in terms of loading the entire application.
Because it's the same file code. Where do you gain?
You gain when you not especially use all your agents first. So maybe when you launch your application, you need 2-3 agents. So your application is lighter in memory at that time. And as you go, as you use your application, then you load the agents. And in the end, it's the same. But maybe there are some use cases where some of your agents are never used by someone.
So what he's describing is staging the launching of agents throughout your code the way you would a plugin architecture, where, hey, I need this now I will launch it, rather than launching everything to begin with. There are some flavors of this, or some instances of this software application where we don't have a whole suite of sensors, right? We have a simplified test station that just has a subset, yes, doing that would save me from launching a lot of agents that never actually get communicated to. Somebody else had a question. John.
Just to add on what Matthias was saying, I think there's another type of performance increase, that's a development time. When you componentize your code, you end up with much more modular code, easier for you to change. So
Yes, so the biggest performance benefit is your personal development performance. It will make it faster and easier to make changes. Casey.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about when you went to the multiple racks and what refactoring was like in that instance. So you were at N1 and then you had to go to an array sort of solution. Like, maybe walk us through.
Okay, so yes, and there's a bit behind that. So going from one test station to being able to test 24 articles at once. So first, the sequencer had to be spun off into or refactored into an agent that I could launch. Some of my systems have 3 test stations. Some of them have 24. So I can dynamically decide how many sequencers I need depending on the station that I'm on. There are shared equipment, shared instruments, huge power supply. I don't need more power supplies to run more stations. They're just charging something up and they're idle. So that's an example of equipment that I need to create an instrument manager for that would make sure that multiple people weren't trying to use it at the same time. You don't really need 24 $15,000 oscilloscopes. It'd be much better to spend one day of software time and save a lot of money and space. So part of that instrument manager also included the concept of equipment locking. I have all these sequences that are all running concurrently. One of them gets to a stage in the test recipe where the recipe itself will say, I need this set of equipment and I need to lock it for the next 30 seconds because these all work together. And then all my other sequencers, if they see the lock, they'll just wait and show on the front panel that it's locked by this other sequencer. This is how long it's been locked. And then as it releases, then other guys get to use it. Somebody was asking me why I didn't use Active Framework. The question I get more often is, why didn't I use testing? The primary reason is probably because, like I said earlier, it grew from a small application. The other reason is there is a lot of custom code that would not be as easy to generate, wouldn't be as dynamic if I was using TestStan as my test executive. I didn't talk about this, I do have a bunch of agents that are doing equipment monitoring and control, maintaining, I don't have this, but it's an example, maintaining a variable transformer state, that's the kind of thing, or maintaining pressure in a vessel, with a pressure controller. Those all get launched and spun off and started. I didn't want it to be possible for my end user to blow things up because they forgot to put a step in the test stand sequence.
So from a business standpoint, you start and do a prediction what the change vectors can be to the project, and suddenly the customer says, I want to change my car in this measure. And you find out my predictions are wrong. How do you communicate that with the customer? Because you did the wrong predictions. It will cost a lot of time and money. Who will pay for that? How do you...
So,
on the other side, the customer does a 180 degrees. So.
It is a difficult conversation because effectively you're going to ask for more money, right? Because you had that frank discussion. You decided these are the ways it's going to change, or that's the way what's what we could need in the future. But what your scope right now is the requirements you were given. And so even though you're trying to design for requirements you've never seen before, your deliverables are the things that were agreed on. And so if they change the requirements enough that you need to make your car submersible, then you have to have a difficult discussion with them and explain why it's going to take more money, more schedule, and get their team to understand and buy into that.
So would you take part of it? So only let them pay half the hours?
No, I think at the outset, you have very, especially after you've done this, you would have a pretty strong agreement that this is the current design. And so if they want to make it submersible in the future, that is a new project or a large ECM.
So that would mean that you communicate your predicted change factors to the customer. So you say, this is my architecture, I predict this could happen in the future, maybe.
So your customers are usually pretty smart, right? It's when you're doing these initial meetings with the customer, you're defining, yes, things might change in this way or that way, or we might want to have more test systems, that kind of thing. You're actually speaking their language, right? They're looking at what they want to get done and what they will want to get done, not necessarily how things are architected, right? So when it gets to be a large enough change that your architecture doesn't fit the needs, then you have to sit down with them and say, all right, we had talked about this, I structured it like this, and you give them a little high-level overview of this is how it is under the hood, why this will not accommodate this change that you're asking for, and they're usually pretty understanding because you've had those conversations. Brandon.
Essentially this question, so one, I'm curious on this question, say, issue,
No, this was time and materials, thank you. The question was it fixed price or time and materials? R&D environment, there's no way we can scope this, right? If I can't put a milestone on it or say what's going to get done in how long, then it's pretty much impossible to bid as a fixed price project.
So curious on your, how they handle the change. Time to but I'm curious on how you handle that effectively.
That is a good question. It's totally not software related at all. So the question is, fixed price, there's a process for a change, right? You do an engineering change notice or change request. And it's very well communicated. Time and materials, it's not as strict typically. You don't have not everyone has a process for communicating the cost of changes to the customer. In that environment, when the customer says, we want to try this, then my response is, okay, I think that will take about a day and a half with 2 people. That's my schedule. Here's about how much it'll cost. I'll roll it out, y'all can try it. And then I just keep notes on these are decisions that were made. This was the estimate of cost, and periodically I send that to them, and thankfully they just keep adding money to the PO. Everything is great. Yeah.
Do
Yes.
you have all your agents in a single project, or one project per agent?
That is a good question. Do I have all my agents in a single project, or are they split up into projects for portability? I wish they were split into other projects.
For your team to run the project.
Yes. And if y'all have developed on teams, you know some of the pain points there. Source code control, how many people touch that VI. Even if that's another benefit for the code modularity, right? If it's very modular, then guys aren't touching code all over the place. They have very discrete changes. It's very easy to manage your team you go work on this logger, you work on this data analyzer, and they don't step on each other's toes. The project file itself is an issue, right? You add classes, class files also. any library file. It is a pseudo XML format that your source code control will attempt to merge and kill it, right? So we set our source code client to treat those as binaries and not do a text merge. We kind of, it's not ideal, but I don't know how else to do it in graphical programming language. We have one guy that's kind of like, he's the manager of the project file, and if people need classes added, they just message him, and he adds the classes from the folders that they request. And that's about the best that we can do with that. But yes, if they were split into lots of projects, then I would know they were decoupled, and people could play with their own project files, and it would be better. Thank you for that.
So we have a workaround for the project merge. We don't merge the project file. But if you need to make a change to the project file, before you do it, you pull from the latest development branches of the branch that no one else is supposed to be working in. It's like a pre-release branch. You pull that into your code, so you've got the latest released version of that project. You make your changes, you make sure everyone's okay, then you push it back into there. Then people can pull from there and fix their own problems as they go.
So you never actually merge that file, but you manage it through the source code.
All right, so effectively, it's a very short-term ownership of the project file. So is one a code branch in his repo that has the project file, and before you modify the project file, pull it from the repo and modify it, push it right back. If everybody follows that, unless somebody's doing the same thing in the same 5 minutes, then you probably won't have any problems.
So, just to add to that, I think the pattern is that if he said dev branch, so I'm thinking like the Gitflow style. So there's a master branch that you build off of, and then there's a dev branch that everyone sort of syncs with. And when you're in your own branch, you have to pull from dev first and merge dev into your branch, and then you can push your branch to dev. And
Yeah, I would love to do a whole session on source code control and Gitflow, workflow. It's been delightful. It's probably the most significant change in the way that I work out of all the tools that I've used. LabVIEW upgrades, that's great, you know, I appreciate it, but that one was one that just like changed everything. So especially large team development. So check out just any distributed version control system if you're not using one.
I'm curious to see who is using Gitflow.
How many people here are using Git or Mercurial? Okay, how many people are using the Gitflow workflow? All right, that's excellent. When I first went from centralized to a distributed version control system, and like, wait, before all I had to do was lock it, and then nobody could change it, right? Now I look at this, I'm like, how do I use this? What do I do? It's very wide open for a lot of different workflows. The challenge is getting your team to consistently use the same workflow. Once that's down, then there's lots of benefits.
How often do you do hand merges?
How often do I do merges, branch
Hand
merges?
merges.
And
Hand merges.
oh, hand merges. How? So we were talking about this last night. I've been using Git and the Gitflow workflow for about 3 years, maybe two or three years. I've had to do a hand merge of LabVIEW code like 3 times. Yeah, it's not that often. You can set your client to launch LD compare. During the merge, your files are already staged in the staging area if you're familiar with Git, and so you can actually modify them, right? You can copy from this VI and paste it into this VI, and then save, and then your commit will have the merge code. So, but I will strongly attribute that lack of hand merging to modular code structure and modular team development, right? All right, any other questions?
One more go right back to the first question about the GUI agents.
Yes.
So is it updating from how it's not displayed as another cost? Presumably you start to worry about how much memory they're using by having 58 versions of the same data depending on which ones.
Yes, so back to having all these agents running in the background, especially the GUI agents, you may not have to worry about processor resources redrawing graphs, but they still do take memory resources. And yes, that is intentional so that we don't have gaps in our data. The normal limiting your history on your graphs and charts, and just memory's pretty cheap. Stick a bunch in before you start. You're not going to grow that much, and this is one of those times where that patch of just buy better hardware actually is sufficient. And then, of course, before you deliver, check that you are not growing memory usage. All right, any other questions?